Okay, we have an episode for you today in which our question asker has named names. So their question is this. I'm assuming you two have seen the fact about Amy Porterfield retiring DCA and Jenna Kutcher retiring Gold Digger. I'm so interested to hear your take, not on the decisions themselves, but on the fact around them. What about it do you think has unnerved so many of us online business owners? So, Kirsty, throwing that your way.
It's a good question. And just in case you're listening and you don't have the context on this, is a really quick summary. Amy Porterfield recently retired Digital Course Academy, which has been her flagship online course for, I think, like 10 years, maybe. And at almost the same time, Jenna Kutcher retired her podcast, which has been like a really again, like a flagship of her offers and her lead gen and her whole business system. And I love that this person hasn't asked for our take on the decisions themselves, because if you're anything like me, and I don't know if this is true for you, Amy, but I've had so many emails in my inbox the last couple of months, like offering different takes on why they both decided to, get out of, these elements of the game at the same time. And I mean, the reality is that we don't know, right? They've sent their messages about it, and it's up to them. It's their business. They are free and at will to do whatever they choose with their time and money and capacity and skills. But in terms of what do I think has unnerved so many of us, my suspicion is that for a lot of online business owners, we are not in an easy or necessarily like highly profitable big growth period, right? Given the state of the world, economy, politics, all the rest of it. And so I think that what happens is if you're in a similar space to someone, and, Amy and Jenna are both sort of like stars of, the online course creator world. So if you see someone who is, ostensibly doing really well and really successful, if you see them start to fold offers that you have tried to in some way replicate in your own business. And I don't mean replicate to the point of like copying the format of either of these offers, but perhaps you have built an online course business, or you've decided to add a podcast to help with your lead gen. If you see the big names in the business shutting those things down, and your business is perhaps not performing as well as it used to or as well as you want it to, you can interpret that as an indication that those things are no longer working, which can leave you feeling a little bit at sea, perhaps, about some elements of your strategy. Mm-hmm. So that's my like top level take, but I'm so keen to hear yours, Amy.
Well, I will just admit that I'm like blissfully unaware of what's happening here, and my inbox has not been filled with this. So, anything I say is is very interpretive, let's put it that way, or sideways to this. But one thing that comes immediately to mind, and I think I own part of Amy Porterfield's DCA. I mean, I've bought various pieces of her from her, way back a long time ago, like a decade ago or even more. And I've watched her, particularly more than Jenna, her sort of business trajectory, and seen her get well known, and see like some of the things that she's offered. And one thing, and I think there's two things come to mind immediately for me. One is the change in the online digital course world, which we can talk about a little bit. And again, that's just, from my perspective. The other thing that I think people don't realize about selling courses particularly, it's a constant marketing game. It's a constant game of building audience, and it can be really time consuming, and it can be really expensive. I think you tend to see people like that, like, maybe on a pedestal. And once they've made it, it's sort of like, their stuff sells, and you hear about these big paydays and these big launches. And Kirsty, better than anyone, a launch is a very big, involved, expensive, time consuming, detailed deal. And there's a lot to it. There's a lot behind driving that engine. There are a lot of people. There's a lot of expense. There's a lot of hard work. And so, I mean, I have no clue like why they've made any decisions they've made, but I suspect that there's a certain point at which that's no longer meeting your needs. It's no longer fulfilling, and that the equations may not work as well as they used to. The profit equations, particularly, right, for building audience, because one of the things that gets talked about in marketing, and particularly in marketing products, is needing to have a moving parade of people. right? Like you need a constant fresh audience and people, I mean, like there are people who, people buy it at various stages of getting exposed to the information that you provide for them or to them, excuse me. But, I mean, at a certain point, the law of large numbers says you're not going to be reaching as many people at one point as you have at another, and that people have made buying decisions. So I don't know. I mean, I mean, things do live their useful life. And it could be that, that's what's happened. And I also think, I'll just say one more thing and I'll throw it to you. I mean, I know from my own experience and just from what I've seen in the course world, and kind of my feeling about where we are right now, I think that, given what you said about sort of like what's happening in the global economy and kind of how that impacts digital businesses, I think we need to do rather than learn at this particular point in time. And I think for a lot of us, I think for a long time, it's been like, I just need to know one more thing. And if I just know that, and if I just know that, and if I just know one more thing, it's almost like then I'll be qualified, then I'll be ready. And I think what we're coming around to is, you're qualified, you're ready. You need to take what you already know and put it to good use and put it into action. And I think that has an impact on this whole marketplace as well. Anyway, that's my very removed from actually answering this question. And even why people are talking about it, which you may be able to address more clearly. But I don't know. What do you think about all that noise?
Oh, the best noise. Make it louder. I feel like there are two things in there. I was like, yes, like mic drop. The things live their useful lives. The phrase that was something like that. I was like, yes, like, and like useful in terms of like, of course, all the things you said are true in that, you know, over time you probably reach a point where it's harder to get the same kind of traction with an offer, the simple fact that the audience pool is not always exponentially growing, right? So the return on something is going to diminish at some point. But also, I think beyond that, like the fact of the amount of interest someone might have for still running an offer, like, on such a smaller scale, like I stopped doing done for you copywriting years ago because I didn't have the interest anymore to deliver that. Does that mean done for you copywriting is no longer a valid thing to sell in a business? Like, of course not. It's just that I personally evolved out of that, mainly for reasons of like becoming a parent and etc. But so I think that's worth remembering too, that useful lifespan for an offer can be about the marketplace and it can be about the audience, but it can also be about the person behind the offer delivering it. Because I think at the end of the day, yes, you can make money, but if the cost of that making money is boredom, fatigue, burnout, like what's the point? The other thing that you said that I was like, yes, say it more was, I've forgotten your sentence now and I should have written it down, but it was something about the time now is for doing rather than learning in the course world. And I think that's also true. I think that's a really critical thing to talk about. And I realize that we're sort of moving away from maybe the names in this question, but I actually think we're answering it because I think it's these bigger things that speak to the faff, about the decisions that these two people have made in their businesses and in their offerings. Yes, I 100% agree. I think the perceived value of an online course has shifted so much over the last couple of years for a number of factors. I think that's a huge part of this. And I think too, like, I would love to get your take on this part too, Amy. What's your read on, I guess, how much fear or anxiety these things could be having on someone who is perhaps not having a great year in their business? Because I think that's probably the case for a lot of people that we know, a lot of people listening, for example. So I wonder if you have any thoughts to shed on that, because I feel like you're on a roll.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we've seen this before with some other big names where they've like either iterated their business or like, taken a hard turn, to some other direction or working in some other method. And I think I don't know even the extent to which we're aware that we sort of like these people are representing something to us. But when they change or they shift, it can feel seismic, like, the market is shifting, things are changing. They must know something I don't. And there's like this urge to follow them, or I think that's what the sort of this inquiry comes from. I think it's like, why did this happen, and what are they doing, and is there something I should know? And I mean, I guess there's a gossip factor too, like just like curiosity about people. I mean, I think it kind of reverberates, and people feel like, does that mean that it's going to trickle down to them, and that their ground, like, did they stop this because it's no longer good? And does that mean, does that impact what I'm doing fundamentally? And how do I know that? And like you said, you never know. I mean, there's so many reasons for a thing. And I guess in this case, two well-known names doing something like seemingly similar at the same time could indicate to people that, maybe there's something like, what are the signals? What's about to happen? What am I looking for? And I think that's just such a problem, like in general in business, particularly right now. Social media has become so commonplace, and it's so easy to think we're getting a look into something that may or may not be accurate. I mean, it may be manufactured. And I don't mean that people are liars, but I mean, everything is so, I mean, everyone puts their best foot forward and tells their best stuff and shows their shiniest self. And so everything looks great. And so we have so much access to that that I think we've kind of let the algorithm determine our actions in a lot of ways, and that we bend to it more than it bends to us. And I'm really feeling like very much in this particular year, because we're February now, it's kind of the start of a new year. I'm feeling very much like the backlash to AI is to become more personal, is to become more human, is to have more contacts that have more context, and to not just be feeding everything into the beast and believing the beast and letting the beast sort of dictate what we think or believe. And I think I mean, I think there's been a lot of fear, like AI is going to replace me and AI is going to be able to do this and that. And I think we're starting to see like it's great for what it's great for. It's not great at craft. It's not great at being human because it isn't human. It's not great at caring or taking care or making connections. Like all the things that we can do as humans, I think need to be amplified in business. I think it means pulling back from like just a lot of big assumptions that we think we can make because of what we think we see. And I feel like that's the moment that we're in. And to me, that's relevant to this because I think it's almost like a wave. Like we all see something like, woo, we all bend toward this thing. Like it must be true. It must be the way it is. But there's so many layers below that we just don't see and we don't know. And I think we're just really subject to the sort of the mass opinion in a way that just isn't good for us and isn't very real. That's my take.
Yes, I love this take. And it makes me think, and I think we're talking about the same or at least very similar things here, but it makes me think about self-trust. And it is the thing that I think is like the most important currency in business because it just involves such a level of self-awareness and also like empowerment. I think that you have the ability to make your own decisions, to go your own way, to change, track accordingly for whatever reason is valid. And I wonder if there's an element in this scenario where it's almost like for a lot of online business owners and particularly online course creators, Jenna and Amy have sort of made the rule book. And so there are people who have been bought into that rule book and have been following that and trying to build a business based on those ideas and those mechanisms. And of course, some have been very successful, but then you see the people who wrote the rule book like almost tear it up and be like, we're not going to do these things anymore. So I think in that case, if you haven't built up your own like reason for doing things, your own way of measuring the success of your efforts and the impact of those and making sure that those measures are actually dictated by you as opposed to what someone else has told you should aspire to, I think then it can feel like the rug's been pulled out from under you because you no longer have that person guiding you, or like they've suddenly like just stopped doing that thing or stopped working within the blueprint that they've taught you or shown you and that you're following. And I think in that scenario, the thing that you probably don't have is self-trust, like the ability to choose your own path, to go your own way, to make your own decisions, and therefore not to see everybody else's decision as a potential red flag or warning sign, because you have the data, you have the belief, you have the knowledge, you have the lived experience of seeing that, well, that's okay, because in my business at the moment, actually, my flagship course is really working. Or, my podcast is a great source of lead gen, and it's something that still feels fun for me to do. So I wonder if we're sort of talking about similar things there in terms of that self-trust, but also the way you framed it, Amy.
I think we are 100%. And I think it's part of the curse of working alone and having so much access, but being so isolated because we don't really know. And I mean, we're humans, so we want that validation and we want to double check and we want to be certain. And I mean, it's natural to look to people who are successful and want to emulate them. And I think you hit a really important point of, if we see them, I don't know, what comes to mind is like burning something down, and we don't know that they're burning it down, but when we see somebody dismantling something or changing course, I think it makes us question everything. So I think you're right. I mean, like fundamentally, what do you know and what do you trust about yourself? And like, are you sort of, implementing that or actualizing that all along as you go? Because if you're not, something like this could really cause you to spin out and to think like, well, shit, like, what about me? Or, what's left in the marketplace? And so I think you're spot on about it coming back to self-trust and like what you know and how you use that as sort of your own North Star, or your own compass to create what you want and what you know. And I was going to say, regardless of like what you see, I mean, it's kind of a vicious circle in a way, or a catch-22, or however you want to think of it, because there is validity to that. I mean, there is validity to, product market fit and what people are doing and what's working and what isn't working. And there are actual things that work and don't work. But I think we have to be really careful, kind of as you're saying, like self-trust and sort of like the differentiation, right, between what you're doing and what somebody else is doing or what you perceive they're doing. That makes sense? Is that?
Yes, so much sense. Yeah. Maybe there's almost like a full circle point in here too, about the fact that the online course world has changed. And I think maybe part of that is that people are getting like awake to the fact that if someone is promising you a pathway to have what they have or to do what they do, it's actually not that appealing, perhaps in a scenario like this, right? Where it's like, well, what do I have now? So I think you want to look for courses and programs and experiences. Probably, I think experiences are selling a lot more effectively now than courses, right? Straight up learning, but that might be beside the point. But something that builds up your skills, your self-reliance, your self-trust, could be a very sideways little note, but I just felt like there was something in there that could be relevant to this conversation as well. If you are someone perhaps who is feeling like you're in the faff, as this person has suggested in asking the question.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking of, other things that I've seen like this. And I think people get scared. I think that's what a lot of it is. It's just, wanting reassurance or wanting to make sure that, I guess, especially if you have bought into, and I don't mean that in a negative or derogatory way, but if you've bought into a way of doing things or following someone, and what you sort of were following isn't there anymore, isn't there in the same way, I think it can feel very unnerving, right? Or destabilizing in some sense. But I like thinking back on other things like this. I mean, the impact in the end is not very big. I mean, it doesn't, right? It doesn't seem to really make any big difference in any individual's business. And it's funny, I'll say too, I mean, the whole digital course model, I think it's really suffered a lot in the last couple of few years, as we've all admitted how we interact with this kind of content, right? I mean, how many of us, have how many things on our hard drive that we've done partially or not at all, or, some that have been really meaningful and effective. But I think it's been seen as this real panacea. If you build it, they will come. And it's really not that. And I can attest to it. I can speak from personal experience, like having built courses and sold them and found that, what I wasn't prepared for was all the marketing and all the hustle that it involved that really doesn't interest me. It doesn't fit my business model. And not that I mean, I've sold a fair amount and it's worked, and it's been a good thing for me, and I feel like I'm proud of what I've done. But I feel like it's important to acknowledge that it's also been put on a pedestal, I think, as a business model to some extent. Is that fair?
I think so. And I mean, I think you're right. I think it's like there definitely, I think, was a time where the online course industry was booming, right? Like back in the late 2010s. But I do think, given that straight up knowledge has become, just a good prompt away, I think businesses that perhaps can't keep up with that and can't acknowledge that and reflect that in the offerings that they're putting out there, they're probably suffering. And as you say, Amy, as well, I hope that people are more, aware of that fact now, that it's not a passive income business when you're, selling a digital product, because as you say, there's actually so much effort involved in marketing and, all the back end stuff, et cetera, et cetera. I kind of wonder if the thing that we're speaking to here is like maybe a way to start wrapping this up is that I wonder if whether it's this recent, scenario with Amy in general, if it's a similar scenario at another point in time, if it's hit you hard, I wonder if that's because there's some question of like impermanence sitting within you about your business. Like, can I make this work? Is this model worth pursuing, et cetera, et cetera? And then when you have two like stalwarts of the industry suddenly sort of exit from certain elements, it's kind of like the optics of impermanence are sort of now reflected externally from you as well. So I wonder if there's something in there that might resonate with people. I don't know if I explained that well. It's on my
No,
hands
yeah, you
moving
did.
along.
I think it's a really astute observation. I mean, I do. I think it's true. And I think, one of the hallmarks of entrepreneurship is being adaptable. And especially when you're a small or you're a solo business, because I mean, as we've seen, like in this past year, global events, shift in economy. I mean, change is predictable, right? And you have to learn how to, how to move with it. And some of these things, like you said, like this may just seem bigger and more visible, but like it's sort of the game you're playing all the time. And so I think you need kind of a level set. And I think this is what you're saying. Tell me, I mean, like in yourself or in your own belief or in your own business, because that's really the measure. And like we all get off track. I mean, right, or stay on track, right? We try things, they don't work. You come back to something, and maybe it's just that, or maybe that's what you're saying too, like seeing something succeed for so long and you watch it grow and you watch it turn into this, behemoth, and it just seems permanent. And it's like, oh shit, nothing's permanent,
Yeah. Exactly. Yes, I think all of that is so true. I think you've summed that up so well. It's out there as a potential topic for a future episode. If you're listening, I would love to actually like reply to me or, send a message to Amy about this. I feel like the episodes you've recorded recently, Amy, there's this emerging theme of so much of entrepreneurship almost been about personality traits, and I'm so keen to explore that. So if that like piques anyone's interest, please let us know. And if not, Amy, let's you and I catch up for a Zoom cocktail so that we can dive into that and pull it apart, because I would love to.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. And it's funny you say that, because I find that that's coming up more and more in my work. It's very interesting. I think we've exhausted this. I mean, unless you like your crystal ball came rolling in while we were talking, and you had like some specific answers about what's going on internally.
Yeah, no, I think we've responded to this as best we can. I hope it's helpful for the person who asked the question, and perhaps anyone else who has been having some responses to this, or even if you're like Amy, like, kind of oblivious to this particular set of circumstances, but also feeling some shifts in the space. I hope there's been something here that's been useful for you. As always, if you have a question you would like us to dive into in a future episode, head to businessbadass.co and submit your question there. Or like if you do like our idea of diving into the personality traits of successful entrepreneurs, like also let us know that, because I think that's a conversation that Amy and I are going to have regardless of whether or not we record it. Thank you so much for listening.
Yes, submit a question. And you can also come right into our inboxes if that's easier for you. So we just want to hear from you and we want to answer your questions. Thank you for listening. We'll catch you next time.
If you've enjoyed listening to us share our insights on this episode and you want more, head to the links in the show notes to find where you can sign up to be on our newsletters. So Amy's newsletter delivers weekly insights on how to build and grow a sustainable business that fills your coffers and feeds your soul. And my newsletter is all about optimizing your communication skills and habits. So the link in the show notes will take you to my assessment that will help you pinpoint your communication style and give you some strategies to improve and optimize things this week.